Riots broke out in Paris after a football game on May 31st, 2025, leaving 2 dead and 190 injured. Despite heavy police presence, celebrations turned violent, and this is the latest in a series of similar public disturbances in France over recent years. Welcome to Riks Europe, Pierre-Marie Seve, Director of Institute for Justice.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to speak to a broader European public.
And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Can you start off by telling us what happened?
So last Saturday there was the Champions League final, so it was a football game between the team of Paris and I think a team from Milan in Italy. The football game was actually taking place in Germany, in Munich. So it. At first sight, you would think it should not have any effect on public order in Paris, but it did have a very great effect on public order in Paris, and not only Paris, but whole Paris region, but even more broadly in the whole of France. In many towns of France, Paris became a very popular football game and football club these last years. So they have I don't know if we can call them fans or supporters, but in the whole of France. So we've seen pretty grave incidents in many cities very far away from Paris, in the south of France, in the west of France, near the ocean. So during the game, my first reaction, as I live very near Paris, the first thing I saw was many. How do you call that? The things you throw in the sky for celebration for New Year's.
Like a firework or
fireworks.
Something.
That's it. So we heard many fireworks. It is something very unusual. I know it happens pretty often in the south of Italy. Naples is pretty famous for having fireworks at New Year's Eve that are illegal. Then people just buy from a store and that they shoot them in their garden, in their backyard. And for France, it's very unusual. And I think it is the first time I'm pretty sure it's the first time that I heard any illegal fireworks, private fireworks, especially for a football game. But we didn't see them for the World Cup the last football World Cup football, or the one before where we won. We didn't hear any fireworks. It was something that didn't happen. It was not in the culture. So that's the first thing. During the game, there were many fireworks. So in the middle of Paris, really in the heart of Paris, one of the streets where there are many bars, they had to evacuate the bars because some of the illegal fireworks had started a fire on one of the very beautiful and old buildings that you see in Paris. So that was during the game. And right after the game, even a few minutes before the end, as we knew Paris was going to win. But honestly, I think the outcome of the football game had absolutely nothing to do with what happened next. Whether Paris would have won or lost, the same thing probably would have happened. The same incidents. So Paris did win 5-0. And so right after the game, the first clashes with the police started, and we've seen throughout the night many different incidents, especially in the heart of Paris near the Champs-Élysées, with many clashes with police. At the end, we saw a few hundreds of people that were injured. 2 deaths in the whole of France. One was in the southwest, so very far away from Paris, and the other was in the southeast. So once again in Grenoble, very far away from Paris. We've seen many incidents. For example, we've seen a policeman that received the fireworks, that somebody shot a fireworks right on his head, so really from not from afar, from a very near, very close distance. And the policeman still is in the coma today, and it was once again very far away from Paris, but still during the celebrations. At the end of the day, well, at the end of the night, we saw 600 people that were arrested by the police, which is, for comparison, a lot more than when we won the World Cup in 1998. And this is known in France as a very big celebration. The World Cup was taking place in France, and France won. And there were a few dozens of people that were arrested, and and last week it was 600 people arrested in the whole of France. We've seen so many videos of crazy things happen. We've seen people getting seeing their motorbike stolen in the middle of the street. We've seen grave and very grave accidents, car accidents in Paris between people on bikes, between people on foot, and cars running on them, literally. So we have, so in the end, we have 600 people arrested, about a few hundreds of people that were injured, and many of them severely injured, and 2 deaths. So it is a very, it's not a surprising outcome. I think the police especially, but the whole of France, honestly, knew this was going to happen, because for the semifinals, it had already started. Many supporters coming from the suburbs of Paris came into Paris and destroyed many things, buses, cars, and everything. So it was not surprising, but still, when you wake up to this, and I have many friends that live around the stadium of Paris, and when they see burnt cars, when they see a part of the urban fences that were destroyed, or red lights that were destroyed, it is still, even though we know France, we know we have many problems in terms of demographics and the separation of more and more people. There's no public cohesion anymore, but still it hurts as French, and we are pretty ashamed. Well, I am pretty ashamed, and I think most of French people are ashamed of what happened, and of what this minority has done to Paris and to France.
And as mentioned in the introduction, that this is the first of, this is one of several of these kinds of sort of incidents in recent years where there's been riots and violence breaking out. Why do you think this is happening in France as often as it is?
True. I told you that whatever the outcome, this was going to happen. Whatever the outcome of the football game, and whatever celebration, whatever occasion of celebration turns out into a chaos in France for the last few years. Well, it has something to do with our French traditional culture. It's true, because a few years ago there were pretty massive riots from the French popular and rural parts of France that came to Paris. So we have a culture, a French culture of revolutions. So violence can erupt, but in this specific case, even though this culture can exist, we all know, and every French people know, that it has to do with the demographics of French. We know that 99% of people that were in the streets of Paris and that made that chaos were from an immigrant background. We know that, and we know this for years. We know that it is also true of crime in general, that immigrants are vastly overrepresented in the crime statistics. And if you go at whatever court of justice, you will see many, and if not a majority of people with an immigration background, whether it's recent or older.
Yes, because
so I would say that that's pretty much the main reason to me is that we have people in France coming from immigration that are not integrated into French culture, not at all, that don't want to be. They are still from their country of origin culture, which is mostly Islamic, an Islamic culture, but not always. We have also a lot of Christian Africans, and I'm not sure it changes the problem that much. So these people are not integrated, and more than that, the French system and the French state has been giving them, has been punishing the wrong persons, and has been giving rewards and rewarding the wrong persons as well. Because these people, for example, the judicial system finds all kind of excuses. The judges, they find all kind of excuses never to condemn them to severe sentences, and that's been happening for years. And this is exactly what happened the day after, because the 5 first people that were arrested, that they had shot fireworks at police, they had destroyed buses, they had destroyed cars. Some of them had no legal status in France or were foreigners. And all of from the first 5 that were arrested and judged on Monday, none of them received a prison sentence, none. And at the same time, there was another. Well, yesterday there was another case in the Tribunal of Paris, in the Court of Justice of Paris, about some nationalist that made some racist remarks to a French artist of African origin, and they received a prison sentence. So even though I understand that making racist remarks is not acceptable, but you can really see here, it's a very simple example of how people attacking the police, if they have the right background and the right profile, they won't receive any punishment. And at the other end, if you have white privilege, you will be punished tougher than the other thing. Even though these people that made racist remarks didn't attack anybody, didn't commit any violence. So you can see a difference in the way the state deals with these people.
How are French people reacting? Are people starting to make noise about this, wanting change?
I would say the French people want change, have been wanting some change for a very, very long time. I made some research one day, and since 1981, even every year that polling institutes ask French people whether they think there is too much immigration or not, every year since 1991, they say there is too much immigration. But even though this is clear and crystal clear to everybody that the vast majority of French people want less immigration and want a judicial system that is harsher towards the common criminals, nothing changes. And even worse, the immigration levels have been rising every single year, except 2020, because of COVID, has been rising every single year since 1991. So the French people realize that. They realize it in a more and more radical way, but still it doesn't change anything at the political level. And I would say that there is a very big gap between what the elected officials, political officials, say and do, and what their electors want. And there is really, I have a very clear memory of this. I was near the French Parliament with my think tank, and we were asking for a harsher judicial system. And we saw at the same time, we had a stand, a kiosk in front of the parliament. And at the same time, we saw a protest of people from the far left that were farmers from the far left. It was kind of a syndicate of farmers from the far left. And we we discussed with these farmers, and 99% of them were in favor of a harsher judicial system, of less immigration and everything. But the far left politicians, they favor a more lenient judicial system every single time. Every time they can favor it, they do. And every time they can favor more immigration, they do. So there really is a problem between what people want and what the people vote and who the people vote for.
I'll go a little bit back to what you mentioned previously, talking about the French culture, but also people not integrating. Because from what I understand in this particular case, it is not necessarily newly arrived migrants that were behind this, but third, fourth generation. So why do you think that is? Is it an integration problem or a cultural problem?
Well, it is an integration problem mainly because the French state doesn't like itself anymore. But I think more broadly that the whole Western peoples have a tendency to hate themselves. We all have a tendency to hate ourselves collectively, of course. That's not my case personally, and I guess it's not yours. But we have a tendency to commit self-suicide, and so we're not proud anymore of who we are. We're not proud of our history, and collectively we see a consequence of that. As, for example, in the public education system of France, year after year since the 60s, classes of history have been reduced, and today history is almost, you can choose not to do any history at all. In many cases. So we don't know our history. We don't like our history. We're not proud of it. So of course you cannot integrate anyone when you're not proud to a certain extent of who you are. So this doesn't work anymore. And the challenge is even more challenging because we try to integrate today, since this maybe the 60s or the 70s, we try to integrate people that are very far away from our culture. People from Northern Africa, we've been apart for 1,500 years. We've been separated by a sea, but by religions that have been at war many times over the centuries. So of course integration cannot work. It simply cannot work, and that's one of the main issues. There's a pretty famous book that went out in France a few years ago that is called The French Archipelago, and I think this is very true of France, probably true of many countries in Europe, that France used to be a single island with pretty homogenous people, with people that share their ancestors, their religion, that have been sharing it for centuries, for more than 1,000 years. And over the last 30, 40 years, it's become an archipelago. And even between French people, you will have French Catholic island. You will have the French Protestant island. You will have the French mainstream island that is shrinking more and more. And of course, you have Islamic islands. And all of these islands don't communicate a lot anymore. And this is why I was telling you that the public cohesion in France has reached probably an all-time low, and this is it. When you walk in the streets of Paris, the people that you will pass by, you don't share anything with them. They haven't seen the same classic French movies that I have seen when I was a kid that my parents showed me. They don't know the history of France. I'm gonna say something. I'm gonna make a historical remark or reference. They won't get it, and that's not their fault. They come from far away. And even if they're French, the French culture has been fragmented, even between French people. So of course, no integration, no public cohesion, and the consequence mainly is violence.
A final question here. A lot of people argue that the media is seemingly focusing mostly on the fact that this was a football event, and this is the reason why, and this is how supporters sometimes act at football games. But Bruno Ratilliou has referred to the perpetrators as barbarians and that they don't represent the majority of supporters, for example. What are your views on the way media has sort of presented this incident?
I think in the whole Western world, we have a problem with our elites that are urban, that are progressive elites. And medias, of course, are the mainstream medias are, of course, one of the places where these elites really gather and they think that the consensus they have in their mainstream media, I don't know, in the building of Le Monde, which is a famous French newspaper, they think that the consensus that they share is the truth, and that everybody must abide by this truth, even though, and they don't realize how different they think from the rest from the majority of the common people, of people like you and I, and so I think the Western medias, they do it sincerely. They sincerely believe that we should not talk about the problems of immigration, that we should not talk about the problems of violence in general, that a good judicial system is a system that compensates the so-called inequalities that should not have taken place, that if you had a harsh childhood because you come from a migrant background, you will be punished less severely, because it is an inequality that the judicial system must compensate. This is what they believe. It's almost a religion, and so they did, and they did it was very open and public, tried to hide what happened and the violence that happened, because they think either they say that it has always been the case. We've seen many people on Twitter saying it has always been the case. When you look at France in 1998, there were some cars that were burnt, and this doesn't make any sense. We know the data. There's no comparison that can be made, but still they believe that, and they want to hide all this in the name of their religion, of their will to integrate, or to pretend that immigrants are integrated into France, even though it's not the case at all.
Thank you very much, Pierre-Marie Seve, Director of Institute for Justice.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching Riks Europe.